Marcus Thompson stood at his bathroom mirror, adjusting his plain black tie one final time. Gone was the sharp, tailored FBI suit he usually wore. Instead, he had on simple khakis and a blue button-down shirt from Target, clothes that would help him blend in as just another middle-class black man in Millbrook City. At 35 years old, Marcus had spent 12 years with the FBI, building a reputation as one of their most skilled undercover agents. But this assignment felt different. This time, it wasn't just about catching criminals. It was personal. "You're the best person for this job," Thompson, his supervisor, Agent Sarah Chen, had told him 3 days ago. She had called him into her office late one evening, closing the door carefully behind them. "We've been receiving complaints about the Millbrook Police Department for years. Racial profiling, planting evidence, false arrests. But we can never make anything stick. The victims are too scared to testify, or evidence mysteriously disappears." Marcus remembered nodding slowly, already understanding where this was heading. On her desk lay dozens of case files, complaints against 2 Millbrook police officers in particular, James Barrett and Michael Reynolds. Their pattern was clear: targeting black drivers in wealthy neighborhoods, conducting aggressive searches, and somehow always finding drugs in the vehicles of those who protested the loudest. "We need hard evidence," Sarah had continued, sliding one particularly thick file across her desk. "And to get that, we need someone on the inside. Someone they'll target without hesitation, but someone trained enough to document everything properly." Marcus picked up the file, his eyes scanning the photos of previous victims. A black doctor arrested while driving home from his night shift. A college student detained while visiting his grandmother. A real estate agent hauled away in handcuffs while showing houses in the neighborhood. "How long have they been getting away with this?" Marcus had asked, his voice tight with controlled anger. "Too long," Sarah replied. "But here's the thing. They're getting bolder. Their last victim was the teenage son of a city council member. The kid had a clean record, but somehow ended up arrested for possession. His father raised hell, which is what finally got us approval for this operation." Now, 3 days later, Marcus checked his hidden equipment one last time. The cameras were so small they were practically invisible. One in his tie clip, another in his watch, and a third in his car's rearview mirror. His phone was set to automatically upload all recordings to a secure FBI server. The plan was simple but dangerous. Marcus would spend the next few weeks driving through the wealthy neighborhoods of Millbrook, particularly along the routes where Barrett and Reynolds usually patrolled. He would do nothing illegal, give them no real reason to stop him. Based on their history, they wouldn't need a reason. His new identity was solid: Marcus Williams, a freelance consultant who recently moved to the area. The FBI had rented him a small apartment on the edge of town and set up a convincing digital footprint. Even if the corrupt officers ran his plates or ID, everything would check out. Looking in the mirror one last time, Marcus thought about his father. The old man had spent 30 years as a police officer in Chicago, always telling his son that wearing the badge meant protecting everyone, not just some. "There are good cops and bad cops," his father used to say, "and the good ones have a responsibility to stop the bad ones." Marcus's phone buzzed. A text from Sarah: "Team in position. Green light when ready." He took a deep breath. 3 surveillance teams would be watching from a distance, ready to move in if things went wrong. But they couldn't be too close, or they might spook Barrett and Reynolds. For the most part, Marcus would be on his own. He grabbed his keys and headed for the door, going over the scenarios in his head. Stay calm. Document everything. Don't break character no matter what happens. One wrong move could blow the whole operation, and worse, let these corrupt officers continue terrorizing innocent people. As he stepped into his carefully selected used Honda Civic, nice enough to afford, but not flashy enough to stand out, Marcus felt the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. This wasn't just another undercover operation. This was a chance to expose the kind of systemic abuse that had plagued communities for generations. "Time to go to work," he muttered, starting the engine. In his rearview mirror, he could see the hidden camera blinking once, confirming it was recording. Everything was set. Now all he had to do was drive through Millbrook and wait for racist cops to do what racist cops do best: target an innocent black man without cause. Little did they know, This time they'd be the ones getting caught. 3 days into his undercover operation, Marcus was driving through Oak Hill, the wealthiest neighborhood in Millbrook. Beautiful houses with perfectly trimmed lawns lined both sides of the street. It was just past 2 p.m., the exact time when officers Barrett and Reynolds usually started their patrol in this area. Marcus kept his speed exactly at the limit, 25 miles per hour. His hands were positioned carefully at 10 and 2 on the steering wheel. Everything about his driving was perfect, giving them no real reason to stop him, but he knew they wouldn't need one. The flash of red and blue lights in his rearview mirror came right on schedule. "Here we go," Marcus whispered to himself, double-checking that his hidden cameras were recording. He pulled over smoothly, positioning his car so the cameras would have the best view of what was about to happen. 2 officers approached his car, Barrett on the driver's side, Reynolds on the passenger side. Marcus recognized them immediately from their photos in the case files. Barrett was tall and thick-built, with a military-style haircut and mirrored sunglasses. Reynolds was shorter, but had the same aggressive stance. Marcus kept his hands visible on the steering wheel, his face calm even as his heart rate picked up. Everything that happened in the next few minutes would be crucial evidence. "License and registration," Barrett barked, not bothering to introduce himself or explain why he pulled Marcus over. "Of course, officer," Marcus replied politely. "May I reach for my wallet? It's in my back pocket." Barrett nodded stiffly. As Marcus slowly retrieved his documents, he noticed Reynolds shining his flashlight through the passenger window, even though it was broad daylight. "Do you know why I pulled you over?" Barrett asked, studying the license with exaggerated care. "No, sir, I don't," Marcus answered truthfully. "Was I speeding?" Barrett's mouth tightened. "You were driving suspiciously slow. This is a residential area. People don't like strangers creeping around their homes." Marcus kept his voice steady, knowing this was exactly the kind of baseless stop the FBI needed to document. "I was driving exactly at the speed limit, sir. I'm new to the area and just being careful." "What brings you to this neighborhood?" Reynolds called from the passenger side, his tone making it clear he thought Marcus didn't belong here. "I'm meeting a client," Marcus explained, sticking to his cover story. "I do consulting work and—" "Step out of the vehicle," Barrett interrupted, his hand moving to rest on his gun holster. "May I ask why, officer?" "Because I said so," Barrett snapped, "and turn off the car." Marcus complied slowly, making sure every movement was captured by his hidden cameras. As he stepped out, he noticed Barrett reaching up to his shoulder, presumably to turn off his body camera. Reynolds had already done the same. The situation was escalating exactly as predicted. In the distance, Marcus knew the FBI surveillance team was watching, ready to move in if things got truly dangerous. But they needed to let this play out, needed to document the full extent of these officers' misconduct. "Spread your legs, hands on the hood," Barrett ordered, starting a pat-down that was far more aggressive than necessary. Reynolds began walking around the car, peering through windows. "You said you're meeting a client? What's their name? What's their address?" "Thomas Davidson," Marcus replied, using the name of the FBI agent who was posing as his fake client. "He lives at 1242 Oak Hill Drive." "Never heard of him," Reynolds said, though there was no reason he should know every resident. Barrett finished his pat-down, finding nothing. But instead of letting Marcus go, he smiled coldly. "I smell marijuana coming from your vehicle." Marcus kept his face neutral, though inside he felt a surge of anticipation. This was their standard line, used in dozens of false arrests. "There's no marijuana in my car, officer. I don't use drugs." "We'll see about that," Barrett said, nodding to Reynolds. "Search the vehicle. Thoroughly." As Reynolds began his search, Marcus noticed him slip something from his pocket, exactly the kind of evidence planting they needed to catch on camera. The next few minutes would give them everything they needed to bring these corrupt officers down. Marcus just had to stay in character and let them dig their own grave. Marcus watched silently as Officer Reynolds began searching his car. Every few seconds, Barrett would push him a little harder against the hood, reminding him who was in charge. The hidden camera in Marcus's tie clip was perfectly positioned to capture everything. "Stand up straight," Barrett ordered, roughly pulling Marcus away from the car. "Watch while my partner searches your vehicle. No sudden movements." The afternoon sun beat down on them as Reynolds made a show of searching the front seats. Marcus could see the small plastic bag in Reynolds' palm, waiting for the right moment to find it. His heart raced, but not from fear. This was exactly what they needed to catch on video. "What's your real reason for being in this neighborhood?" Barrett demanded, standing uncomfortably close to Marcus. "And don't give me that client story again." "Sir, I told you the truth," Marcus replied calmly. "I'm an IT consultant meeting a client named Thomas Davidson. You can call him to verify." "Shut up," Barrett snapped. "You know how many of you people we catch trying to case these houses? Rich neighborhood like this, guy like you driving slow, looking around." Marcus noticed a couple walking their dog on the other side of the street. They quickly crossed to avoid the scene, heads down. He wondered how many times these officers had done this before, how many innocent people had been too scared or helpless to fight back. "Hey Barrett, come look at this," Reynolds called out, his voice filled with fake surprise. Marcus watched through the car windows as Reynolds pretended to reach under the passenger seat. Barrett grinned. "Don't move," he warned Marcus, then walked around to join his partner. The next 30 seconds played out exactly as the FBI had predicted. Reynolds made a show of pulling something from under the seat, the same bag he'd been holding earlier. Both officers had their backs to Marcus, but the camera in his watch had a perfect view of the plant. Well, Barrett said loudly, walking back with the plastic bag. "What do we have here?" "That's not mine," Marcus stated firmly. "You know it's not mine." "Really?" Barrett held up the bag. "So I guess this baggie of cocaine just magically appeared under your seat. You expect us to believe that?" Marcus felt his jaw tighten. Even knowing this was all being recorded, even knowing he was an FBI agent, the injustice of it made his blood boil. "Officer, I saw your partner plant that evidence. We both know what's happening here." Reynolds laughed. "Are you accusing officers of the law of planting evidence? That's a serious charge, boy." "Turn around," Barrett ordered, pulling out his handcuffs. "You're under arrest for possession of cocaine with intent to distribute." As the cold metal closed around his wrists, Marcus thought about his FBI team watching nearby. They would be itching to intervene, to stop this injustice. But they had to let it play out. They needed the entire process documented, from the illegal stop to the false arrest. "You have the right to remain silent," Barrett began reciting, tightening the cuffs a little more than necessary. "Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." Marcus tuned out the Miranda rights, focusing instead on memorizing every detail: the exact time, the position of the sun, the way Reynolds was already writing in his notebook, probably crafting the false narrative they would put in their report. A police transport van pulled up. They had called for it before even finding the drugs, another detail that would help prove their premeditation. As they led Marcus toward the van, he saw more neighbors peeking through their windows, quickly drawing their curtains when spotted. "How many?" Marcus wondered silently. "How many lives have you ruined? How many families have you torn apart with your lies?" The van doors opened, and Barrett roughly pushed him inside. "Enjoy prison," he smirked. "Next time you'll think twice about driving through our neighborhood." As the doors slammed shut, Marcus allowed himself a small smile. His hidden cameras had captured everything. The illegal stop, the turned-off body cameras, the evidence planting, the racist comments, all of it would come out in court. But for now, he had to play his part. He had to let them think they'd won, because sometimes justice worked best when served cold, in front of a packed courtroom where there was nowhere left to hide. The booking process at Millbrook County Jail was designed to break people's spirits. Marcus sat on a cold metal bench, still handcuffed, watching other arrestees being processed one by one. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, and the smell of bleach couldn't quite cover the underlying odors of sweat and fear. "Williams, Marcus," a bored-looking corrections officer called out. "Step up to the desk." Marcus walked forward, his shoes making hollow sounds on the concrete floor. Behind the high counter, a heavy-set officer named Peterson started typing into his computer. "Empty your pockets," Peterson ordered without looking up. "Everything goes in this tray." Marcus carefully removed his wallet, keys, and phone, making sure to press the special button sequence that would lock the phone and activate its secure mode. No one would be able to access the backup copies of his recordings now. Occupation? Peterson asked, still typing. A consultant. Previous arrests? None. This made Peterson look up, smirking. First time getting caught, you mean? Barrett and Reynolds don't make mistakes. If they found drugs in your car, they were your drugs. Marcus said nothing. He noticed officers Barrett and Reynolds standing by the door, filling out their arrest reports. They were taking their time, probably making sure their stories matched perfectly. Raise your right hand, another officer ordered, holding up a camera. The flash was too bright, making Marcus blink. Turn left. Turn right. Face forward. Fingerprinting came next. As they pressed each of his fingers into the ink pad, Marcus thought about how these same fingerprints were in the FBI database under his real name. But he knew the system was set up to hide his true identity. Only a handful of top officials could access his real file. Drug test time, Peterson announced. Follow Officer Jenkins. The next hour was a blur of humiliating procedures, changing into an orange jumpsuit, being searched, providing samples, answering endless questions about his medical history. Marcus played his role perfectly, confused, angry, but not so combative that they put him in isolation. Finally, they led him to a holding cell. 3 other men were already inside, sitting on metal bunks welded to the wall. They barely looked up as Marcus entered. Phone call time in 10 minutes, a guard shouted down the corridor. Marcus sat on an empty bunk, his mind racing. He needed to make his call count. It had to look natural to anyone watching, but also alert his FBI team that everything was going according to plan. When they called his name, he walked to the phone area. Each phone was separated by a small divider for privacy, but Marcus knew every call was recorded. He dialed the number they had prepared, listed in his phone as his sister. Hello? A woman's voice answered. It was Agent Chen, using a voice modifier. Hey Lisa, Marcus said, keeping his voice tired and worried. It's me. I'm in jail. What happened? Chen asked, following their script. These cops said they found drugs in my car, but they planted them. You'd have to believe me, I wouldn't. Calm down, Chen interrupted. Are you hurt? No, I'm okay. This was their code phrase, confirming the operation was successful. But they're saying it's cocaine. They're trying to give me serious time for this. Don't worry, Chen replied. I'll call Uncle Jim right away. Uncle Jim was their code for the FBI legal team. They'll know what to do. Thanks, sis. Tell Mom not to worry, okay? This meant the recordings had been successfully uploaded. The call ended, and Marcus returned to his cell. Now came the hardest part, waiting. He had to spend at least 1 night in jail to make everything look real. Too quick a release would make Barrett and Reynolds suspicious. Through the small window in his cell door, Marcus could see other inmates being processed, most of them black or Hispanic. He wondered how many were actually guilty, and how many were victims of the same corrupt system he was fighting to expose. One of his cellmates, an older black man, noticed his expression. First time inside? Marcus nodded. Word of advice, the man said quietly. Whatever they say you did, just take the plea deal. Fighting it will only make things worse. That's how it works around here. Not this time, Marcus thought to himself. This time, things are going to work very differently. While Marcus spent his first night in jail, FBI Special Agent Sarah Chen sat in a dimly lit operations room, reviewing the footage from his hidden cameras. The images on her screen showed exactly what they needed. Officers Barrett and Reynolds clearly planting evidence and making racist comments. But Chen wanted more than just these 2 corrupt cops. She wanted the whole system that protected them. Play that body camera deactivation again, she told Agent Rodriguez, who was working the computer. The footage showed Barrett clearly reaching up to turn off his camera before the search began. Got something interesting, called up Agent Thompson from another desk. I've been going through their patrol patterns for the last 6 months. Look at this. Chen walked over to see his screen. A map of Millbrook showed dozens of red dots, each representing an arrest made by Barrett and Reynolds. Notice anything? Thompson asked, zooming in. Chen's eyes narrowed. They're all in the wealthy neighborhoods. And here's the kicker, Thompson added, clicking through arrest records. 87% of the people they arrested were black or Hispanic. But get this, over half of those cases were dismissed once they reached court. Because the evidence was planted, Chen finished. But the damage was already done. People lost jobs, homes, reputations. The room grew quiet as the reality sank in. This wasn't just about two bad officers. This was about hundreds of lives destroyed. Agent Wilson burst into the room, holding a stack of papers. "You need to see this," she said, spreading them on the table. "I've been talking to former officers who left the department. 3 of them specifically mentioned Barrett and Reynolds. Said they tried reporting them for misconduct, but the complaints mysteriously disappeared." "Who handled those complaints?" Chen asked. "That's the interesting part," Wilson replied. "All misconduct reports went through Captain Thomas Green. And guess what? Green and Barrett grew up together. Went to the same high school, their fathers worked together on the force." Chen started pacing, her mind racing. So Green buried the complaints to protect his friend. What else did the former officers say? "They said it was an open secret in the department," Wilson continued. "Barrett and Reynolds would make these arrests, Green would back them up, and the district attorney's office would push for quick plea deals before anyone could look too closely at the evidence." Just then, Chen's secure phone buzzed, a message from Marcus's undercover phone. Despite being in jail, he had managed to send them vital information. Overheard guards talking. Not the only ones Barrett and Reynolds brought in today. 2 other false arrests in same neighborhood. "Rodriguez," Chen called out. "Pull up today's arrest records for that precinct." Sure enough, 2 more black men had been arrested by Barrett and Reynolds just hours after Marcus. Both arrests involved traffic stops in wealthy neighborhoods. Both involved drugs, supposedly found during vehicle searches. "They're getting bolder," Thompson observed. 3 arrests in one day? They think they're untouchable," Chen replied. She walked to a large whiteboard and started drawing connections. "Okay, here's what we know. Barrett and Reynolds make the arrests. Green covers up any complaints. The DA's office pushes plea deals." Speaking of the DA's office, Wilson interrupted, looking up from her computer. "I just found something interesting. Assistant DA Robert Phillips handles most of these cases personally. And look at his conviction record. It's almost perfect." "Because everyone takes the plea deal," Chen said. "They're scared, can't afford good lawyers, don't want to risk longer sentences by going to trial." The pieces were falling into place. This wasn't just about dirty cops anymore. This was about a coordinated system of racism and corruption that reached into every level of law enforcement. Chen's phone buzzed again, a message from their contact at the jail. "Arraignment scheduled for tomorrow morning. Judge Sandra Martinez presiding." "Martinez?" Rodriguez looked worried. "She's known for being tough on drug crimes, always sides with the police." Chen smiled for the first time that night. "Perfect. The tougher she is, the better this will work. Everyone in that courtroom tomorrow thinks they're going to see just another black man being sent to prison. Instead, they're going to see their whole corrupt system exposed." She turned to her team. "Get everything ready. Tomorrow morning, we end this." The Millbrook County Courthouse was already busy at 9 a.m. Marcus sat in the defendant's chair wearing his orange jumpsuit, hands cuffed in front of him. Officers Barrett and Reynolds stood confidently near the prosecutor's table, occasionally smirking in his direction. They had done this hundreds of times before. It was just another normal day for them. Judge Sandra Martinez entered the courtroom, her black robes flowing behind her. "All rise," the bailiff called out. As everyone stood, Marcus noticed several unfamiliar faces slipping quietly into the back of the courtroom. He recognized them as FBI agents in plain clothes, but kept his expression worried and defeated. "Case number 2025 CR 1484, State versus Marcus Williams," the court clerk announced. "Charges are possession of cocaine with intent to distribute." Assistant DA Robert Phillips stepped forward, straightening his expensive tie. "Your Honor, the state has strong evidence in this case. The defendant was caught with a substantial amount of cocaine in his vehicle during a routine traffic stop." Judge Martinez nodded, looking down at Marcus with the same cold expression she had given countless other black defendants. "How does the defendant plead?" Before Marcus's court-appointed lawyer could speak, the courtroom doors opened. FBI Director Sarah Chen walked in, followed by more agents in full FBI tactical gear. "Your Honor," Chen called out, her voice filling the courtroom. The FBI would like to intervene in this case. Barrett and Reynolds exchanged nervous glances. Judge Martinez looked annoyed at the interruption. And you are? FBI Director Sarah Chen, she replied, walking to the center of the courtroom. And the defendant is FBI Special Agent Marcus Thompson, working undercover to investigate systematic corruption in the Millbrook Police Department. The courtroom erupted in gasps and whispers. Barrett's face went pale. Reynolds took a step toward the door, but found it blocked by FBI agents. This is absurd, Phillips sputtered. Your Honor. Agent Thompson, Chen continued, was equipped with multiple hidden cameras during his arrest. We have clear video evidence of officers Barrett and Reynolds planting cocaine in his vehicle after an illegal stop. Judge Martinez's stern expression cracked slightly. These are serious allegations, Director Chen. Indeed they are, Chen replied. She nodded to an agent who wheeled in a large screen. With the court's permission, we'd like to play the footage. The judge hesitated, then nodded. The lights dimmed, and the video began playing. The entire courtroom watched in silence as Barrett and Reynolds made their illegal stop, turned off their body cameras, and planted the evidence. Stop the video, Barrett shouted. This is a setup. Officers, be quiet. Judge Martinez ordered, her voice sharp. The color had drained from her face as she watched these officers, men she had trusted countless times in her courtroom, clearly breaking the law. Your Honor, Chen continued, we have documented evidence of officers Barrett and Reynolds conducting similar false arrests over the past 3 years. We've identified over 200 cases following the exact same pattern, targeting Black and Hispanic drivers in wealthy neighborhoods, planting evidence, and pushing for quick plea deals. Marcus stood up, and his court-appointed lawyer finally found his voice. Your Honor, we move for immediate dismissal of all charges. Beyond that, Chen added, the FBI is charging officers Barrett and Reynolds with multiple federal crimes, including civil rights violations, evidence tampering, and perjury. We're also investigating everyone who helped cover up their actions. Assistant DA Phillips started gathering his papers. Your Honor, the state needs time to review. Sit down, Mr. Phillips, Judge Martinez snapped. You're not going anywhere. She turned to the FBI agents. Take the officers into custody. As agents moved to arrest Barrett and Reynolds, chaos broke out in the courtroom. Captain Green, who had been watching from the back, tried to slip out but was stopped by FBI agents. Phillips sat frozen at his table, knowing his perfect conviction record was about to be destroyed. Marcus stood tall, finally removing his handcuffs with a key provided by an FBI agent. He looked directly at Barrett and Reynolds as they were led away in chains, the same way they had led away so many innocent people. Court is adjourned, Judge Martinez announced, her voice shaking slightly. And, Agent Thompson, I believe we have a lot of cases to review. The story exploded across national news within hours of the courtroom revelation. Camera crews surrounded the Millbrook County Courthouse as Marcus Thompson, now wearing his FBI badge, walked out alongside Director Chen. Behind them, Barrett and Reynolds were led to FBI vehicles in handcuffs, their heads down to avoid the cameras. Agent Thompson, reporters called out. How long was the investigation? Did you ever fear for your safety? How many innocent people were wrongly arrested? Marcus stepped up to the microphones, his voice steady and clear. Today isn't about me, he said. It's about hundreds of innocent people whose lives were destroyed by corrupt officers who abused their power. And it's about a system that allowed it to happen. Inside the courthouse, phones were ringing nonstop. People who had been arrested by Barrett and Reynolds over the years were calling to tell their stories. The court clerk's office was overwhelmed with requests to review old cases. We've set up a special hotline, Director Chen announced to the press. Anyone who believes they were falsely arrested by these officers should call. Every case will be reviewed. By evening, the story had reached national television. News channels showed split-screen footage. Marcus's hidden camera video on one side and Barrett and Reynolds' previous arrests on the other. The pattern was impossible to ignore. This wasn't just two bad officers, a civil rights lawyer explained on CNN. This was systematic racism protected by people in power. The police captain buried complaints. The DA's office pushed unfair plea deals. Judges rubber-stamped everything without question. Social media exploded with support for Marcus. Hashtag Agent Thompson and hashtag Justice in Millbrook became trending topics. People began sharing their own stories of police harassment and false arrests. At FBI headquarters, Marcus sat in a conference room watching the coverage. His phone kept buzzing with messages from other FBI agents congratulating him, but his mind was on the victims. First case just got overturned. Agent Chen said, walking in with a tablet, "Remember Michael Carter, the college student they arrested last year?" Marcus nodded. He had read Carter's file during his preparation, arrested while visiting his grandmother, forced to drop out of school after taking a plea deal. Judge Martinez just vacated his conviction, Chen continued. He's being released tonight, and that's just the beginning. The investigation was expanding rapidly. FBI agents were going through every case Barrett and Reynolds had handled. They were interviewing other officers, reviewing body camera footage, checking complaint records. Captain Green was called in for questioning. He arrived with an expensive lawyer, but his confidence crumbled when shown evidence that he had deliberately destroyed complaint records. By midnight, he had resigned from the police department. Assistant DA Phillips wasn't doing much better. Internal FBI analysis showed that he had pursued unusually harsh sentences in cases involving minority defendants while offering light plea deals to white defendants charged with similar crimes. "The whole house of cards is falling," Chen told Marcus. "Phillips is cooperating now, naming names, showing us how deep this goes." Local community leaders organized a candlelight vigil outside the courthouse. Hundreds of people attended, including families of those wrongly convicted. They shared stories of lives derailed by false arrests, jobs lost, relationships destroyed, futures stolen. Marcus attended the vigil, standing quietly in the back. An older woman approached him, tears in her eyes. "My son was arrested by those officers 2 years ago," she said. "He always said they planted the drugs, but nobody would believe him. He's still in prison." "We'll review his case," Marcus promised. "Every case, no matter how long it takes." Late that night, Marcus finally returned to his apartment. He was exhausted but couldn't sleep. On his coffee table lay copies of every case file involving Barrett and Reynolds. Each folder represented a life they had tried to destroy. His phone buzzed, a message from Chen. "Tomorrow's going to be busy. Internal Affairs is launching a department-wide investigation. The mayor's calling for a complete overhaul of police procedures. And we've got 3 more judges asking to review their past rulings." Marcus smiled tiredly. It was just the beginning of a long process, but change was finally coming to Millbrook. The truth had come out, and there was no putting it back in the box. 6 months after the dramatic courtroom revelation, Marcus Thompson stood before the United States Congress. The hearing room was packed with journalists, civil rights leaders, and families of those affected by police corruption. Behind him sat rows of people whose convictions had been overturned thanks to the Millbrook investigation. In the past 6 months, Marcus testified, his voice firm and clear, "We have reviewed over 300 cases involving officers Barrett and Reynolds. 247 convictions have been overturned. 182 people have been released from prison, but numbers don't tell the whole story." He pulled out a photograph and held it up. "This is Michael Carter, the college student they arrested. He's back in school now, studying law. He wants to become a civil rights attorney." He showed another photo. "This is James Wilson, who lost his job as a teacher after they planted drugs in his car. He's teaching again, and now he also runs a support group for victims of police misconduct." The courtroom where it all began to change too. Judge Martinez, shaken by her role in the injustice, had become one of the strongest voices for reform. She now required body camera footage in every case and personally reviewed all evidence in detail. "Your Honor," a young prosecutor said one morning, "the officer's body camera malfunctioned during this arrest." "Case dismissed." Martinez replied immediately. "No exceptions. No camera, no case." The Millbrook Police Department had been completely transformed. The new chief, an African-American woman named Patricia Robinson, had implemented strict new policies. Every officer wore a camera that couldn't be turned off during interactions with the public. Random drug tests were required for all officers. Any complaint of misconduct was investigated by an independent civilian board. Barrett and Reynolds' trial was quick and decisive. with overwhelming evidence against them, including Marcus's recordings and testimony from other officers. Both men were found guilty on all charges. The judge, citing the lives they had destroyed, sentenced them to 20 years in federal prison. "How does it feel?" a reporter asked them as they were led away, "to be going to the same prisons where you sent so many innocent people?" Neither man answered. Their former captain, Green, had already pleaded guilty to lesser charges in exchange for helping prosecutors identify other corrupt officials. Assistant DA Phillips was disbarred and awaiting his own trial. But the impact reached far beyond Millbrook. Police departments across the country were studying what went wrong and how to prevent it. New laws were being proposed requiring independent investigations of all police misconduct allegations. Civil rights organizations were using the case to push for broader reforms. Marcus received hundreds of letters from people sharing their own stories of police harassment and thanking him for standing up. But one letter meant more than all the others. It came from his father, the retired Chicago police officer. "Son," his father wrote, "what you did in Millbrook isn't just about catching bad cops. It's about protecting what the badge is supposed to stand for. You showed that real police work means serving justice, not abusing power." 1 year after the case broke, Marcus returned to Millbrook for a special ceremony. The city was dedicating a new community center focused on police community relations and legal aid for the underprivileged. They named it the Thompson Justice Center. At the dedication ceremony, Marcus looked out at the crowd. He saw Michael Carter, now in law school, sitting next to James Wilson and his teaching colleagues. He saw families reunited after wrongful convictions were overturned. He saw new police recruits being trained under Chief Robinson's reformed policies. "Someone once told me that fighting the system is hopeless," Marcus said in his speech. "That taking the plea deal is just how things work. But we proved them wrong. We showed that justice is possible when good people stand up and tell the truth." He touched the FBI badge on his chest. "This badge means nothing if we don't use it to protect everyone equally. Change isn't easy, and we still have a long way to go. But Millbrook showed us that change is possible when we expose corruption and demand better." As he finished speaking, the crowd rose in a standing ovation. But Marcus wasn't watching them. His eyes were on a group of new police recruits in the back. Black, white, Hispanic, male, female, all wearing body cameras and all ready to serve their community the right way. The system hadn't just punished 2 bad cops. It had transformed itself into something better. And that was the greatest victory of all.